Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The mattress dipped under a weight that shouldn't have been there, and the scent of expensive sandalwood and cold rain flooded Kalen's senses before he could even open his eyes. "Don't pretend you're asleep," a voice murmured, low and rough like gravel grinding against velvet, vibrating right against the shell of his ear. Kalen's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his breath hitching in his throat. He didn't need to look to know who it was. The sheer audacity, the oppressive, magnetic presence could only belong to one man. Kalen snapped his eyes open, his vision adjusting to the gloom of the dorm room, illuminated only by the harsh, artificial glow of a smartphone screen held inches from his face. Above him, braced on hands that pinned Kalen's shoulders into the cheap mattress, was Julian Vane, the golden boy of St. Sterling University, the heir to a logistics empire. The man who had spent the last 6 months treating Kalen like he was nothing more than a stain on the architecture, yet now hovered over him at 2 in the morning with a predatory hunger that turned his blood to ice and fire simultaneously. Kalen tried to speak, but his voice was a dry croak. "You have a lot to say when you think I'm not looking," Julian whispered, his thumb scrolling deliberately on the screen. It was Kalen's screen. His eyes looked like broken glass. "I hate the way he breathes. I want to tear that arrogance out of him." Julian paused, his dark eyes glinting in the blue light. "And my personal favorite. I wonder if he tastes as cruel as he looks." Julian tilted the phone, forcing Kalen to look at the draft folder he had poured his soul into just hours ago. "Well, Kalen," Julian leaned down, his lips brushing the pulse point on Kalen's neck, sending a violent shiver down the smaller man's spine. "Are you going to find out?" To understand how Kalen ended up pinned beneath the weight of his tormentor in the dead of night, one had to understand the ecosystem of St. Sterling University. It was a place where old money fermented into vintage power. Kalen Thorne was a scholarship student, a charity case in the whispers of the elite, studying literature on a grant that required him to maintain a perfect GPA. He was invisible, a ghost haunting the marble halls, trying desperately not to rattle any chains. And then there was Julian Vane. Julian was the sun around which the campus orbited, blinding, distant, and dangerous to look at directly. He was tall, with hair the color of midnight ink and eyes that seemed to dissect people rather than look at them. He was captain of the fencing team, top of the business faculty, and seemingly devoid of human warmth. When the housing lottery had assigned them together at the start of the semester, Kalen had nearly fainted. He expected bullying. He expected eviction. Instead, he got silence. Julian treated him with a cold, clinical indifference. They existed in the same space like oil and water, never mixing, merely tolerating the displacement. Or so Kalen had thought. The day had started like any other Tuesday, gray, rainy, and filled with the crushing weight of academic expectations. Kalen had been in the library, hidden away in the back corner of the archives, nursing a lukewarm coffee and trying to decipher 18th century poetry. "Is this seat taken? Or are you saving it for a ghost?" Kalen had looked up, startled. Standing there was Elias, a junior from the art history department. Elias was everything Julian was not, warm, smiling, with messy brown curls and paint-stained fingers. He was approachable. "Safe. It's free," Kalen stammered, shifting his books. Elias sat down, his smile widening. "I've seen you around. Kalen, right? The guy who aced the modernism midterm? You're kind of a legend in the lit department." Kalen felt a flush rise to his cheeks. "I just study a lot." "Modest too," Elias laughed. "Look, I know this is sudden, but I was wondering if you'd want to grab a real coffee sometime? Not this vending machine sludge." It was the first time in 3 years at St. Sterling that anyone had looked at Kalen with genuine interest, not contempt or pity. He nodded, perhaps too eagerly. "Great," Elias beamed. He scribbled something on a piece of creamy cardstock, a sketch of a coffee cup with a time and place, and slid it across the table. "I'll see you there, legend." As Elias walked away, Kalen felt a warmth bloom in his chest. He wasn't invisible. Someone had seen him. He tucked the note into his pocket like it was a precious jewel, a talisman against the cold reality of his life. He didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows of the stacks, watching the interaction with eyes that narrowed into dangerous, obsidian slits. He didn't feel the drop in temperature as Julian Vane turned on his heel, his jaw clenched tight enough to snap bone. The dorm room was dark when Kalen returned that evening, the only light coming from the street lamps outside filtering through the heavy rain. He was humming softly, the interaction with Elias still buoyant in his mind. He placed his keys in the bowl and turned to his desk, intending to pin the note to his corkboard, a reminder that he existed. But the note wasn't in his pocket. Panic flared. He patted his jeans, his coat. He distinctly remembered taking it out when he came in, placing it on the desk for just a second while he took off his wet shoes. Then he heard the sound. Raya. Kalen froze. He turned toward the other side of the room. Julian was sitting in his high-backed leather chair, legs crossed, looking the picture of aristocratic boredom. In his long, pale fingers he held the creamy cardstock. Or rather, the pieces of it. "What are you doing?" Kalen's voice trembled, a mix of shock and rising anger. Julian dropped the shredded remains of Elias's invitation into the metal waste bin beside him. The sound of the paper hitting the bottom echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Cleaning," Julian said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You left trash on your desk." "That wasn't trash." Kalen stepped forward, his hands balling into fists. That was private property. You had no right." Julian finally looked at him. The intensity of his gaze stopped Kalen in his tracks. There was something dark swirling in those depths, something possessive and ugly. It was a solicitous scrawl from Elias Vance, a mediocrity who smells like turpentine and desperation. "I did you a favor. A favor." Kalen choked out. "He asked me for coffee. He was nice to me. Something you wouldn't understand." Julian stood up. He unfolded his height slowly, looming over the room. The air seemed to thicken, charged with static. "Nice," Julian repeated, tasting the word like it was poison. "You think he wants to be nice to you, Kalen? He wants to collect you. You're the quiet scholarship boy. You're a novelty to people like him. And what am I to people like you?" Kalen shouted, the frustration of 6 months breaking the dam. "A nuisance? A piece of furniture you have to walk around? At least he sees me." Julian moved. It was a blur of motion, too fast for Kalen to track. Suddenly, Julian was in his personal space, crowding him against the edge of his own desk. Kalen gasped, leaning back, his heart slamming against his ribs. "I see you," Julian hissed, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. "I see everything you do. I see how you bite your lip when you're reading. I see how you organize your pens by color when you're stressed. I see how you look at me when you think I'm asleep." Kalen stopped breathing. The air between them was electric, volatile. "You're crazy?" Kalen whispered, though the fear was mixing with something else now. A confusing, hot coil of tension in his stomach. "Maybe," Julian conceded, his eyes tracking the movement of Kalen's throat as he swallowed. "But you're not going for coffee with him. You can't control who I see. Watch me." Julian turned away abruptly, the moment shattering. He grabbed his coat and stormed out of the room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Kalen was left trembling in the silence. He sank onto his bed, his mind a whirlwind. He felt violated, angry, and confused. Why did Julian care? Why did he sound so jealous? It didn't make sense. Julian Vane, the heir to the throne, jealous of Elias? Jealous over Kalen? He needed to vent. He couldn't tell anyone. He had no close friends here, and his family back home wouldn't understand the complex politics of St. Sterling. He grabbed his phone and opened his notes app, his digital diary, the only safe place he had. His thumbs flew across the screen, anger pouring out of him. He thinks he owns the world. He thinks he owns me. I hate him. But as he wrote, the truth began to bleed through the anger. I hate that he noticed the way I bite my lip. I hate that he knows me. I hate that when he stepped close to me, I didn't want to push him away. I wanted him to close the gap. His eyes look like broken glass, intoxicating and dangerous. I wonder if he tastes as cruel as he looks. Kalen wrote until his fingers cramped. He poured out the confusion, the latent attraction he had buried under layers of resentment, the desperate need to be acknowledged by the one person who seemed to look right through him. He didn't send the texts, who would he send them to? But leaving them in the drafts felt like an exorcism. Exhausted, emotionally drained, he tossed his phone onto his desk and climbed into his bunk. He didn't bother waiting for Julian to come back. He curled under the duvet, wishing the world would just disappear. He fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of storms and dark eyes. He didn't hear Julian return. He didn't hear the click of the lock, or the soft thud of designer boots being kicked off. The first thing he registered was the shift in the atmosphere, the heavy, oppressive weight of another presence. Then the mattress dipped, and now here they were, 2 a.m. The world narrowed down to the space of a single twin bed. Are you going to find out? Julian repeated, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. Kalen stared up at him, his face burning with humiliation. You went through my phone. It was unlocked, Julian lied smoothly. They both knew it wasn't. Julian Vane didn't let minor obstacles like passcodes stop him when he wanted something. I came back to apologize. I saw the screen lit up. You read my private thoughts. And they were fascinating, Julian murmured. He tossed the phone onto the blanket, disregarding it. He didn't need it anymore. The evidence was in the flush of Kalen's skin, the dilation of his pupils. Julian shifted, his knee pressing between Kalen's legs. It was a bold, claiming move. The power dynamic that had governed their relationship for months, the prince and the pauper, the king and the ghost, was dissolving, replaced by something far more primal. You hate me? Kalen whispered, his hands coming up to push against Julian's chest, but lacking the force to actually move him. It felt less like resistance and more like he was grounding himself. I tried to, Julian admitted, his voice ragged. I tried to ignore you. I tried to hate you. I told myself you were nothing, just a roommate, just a temporary inconvenience. He lowered his head, his nose brushing against Kalen's. But you're so loud, Kalen. Your silence is louder than anyone else's noise. You walk around this room like you're apologizing for existing, and it drives me insane. I wanted to shake you. I wanted to break you. You did, Kalen breathed. You destroyed that note. Because the thought of you smiling at him. Julian's hand moved up, his fingers tangling into Kalen's hair, gripping tight enough to sting. The thought of him touching you, thinking he has a right to you. It made me want to burn this entire university to the ground. The confession was terrifying. It was obsessive, toxic, and overwhelming. And God help him, it was exactly what Kalen's twisted heart had been craving. He didn't want safe. He didn't want Elias and his polite coffees. He wanted this. He wanted the storm. Why didn't you just say something? Kalen asked, his voice trembling. Because I am a coward, Julian whispered, the admission stark and shocking coming from a man who walked like a god. And because I knew if I touched you once, I wouldn't be able to stop. Kalen looked up into those dark eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath the arrogance for the first time. The broken glass he had written about wasn't just a metaphor. Julian was fractured, sharp edges hiding a desperate need for connection. So, Kalen said, his voice gaining a thread of strength. What happens now? Julian's gaze dropped to Kalen's lips. The hunger there was raw, undisguised. Now, Julian growled softly, I prove that I taste exactly as cruel as you imagined. He didn't wait for permission. He knew he had it. Julian crashed his lips onto Kalen's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was a claiming. It tasted of suppressed rage and months of starving desire. Kalen gasped into the kiss, his hands clutching the front of Julian's silk shirt, pulling him closer. He opened his mouth, allowing Julian to invade, to conquer. Julian's tongue swept into his mouth, dominant and demanding, tasting him, devouring him. Sensations exploded in Kalen's brain. The heat of Julian's body pressing him into the mattress, the rough grip of his hand in Kalen's hair, the scent of sandalwood encompassing him completely. Julian broke the kiss to trail hot, wet bites down Kalen's jawline. "You're mine," he murmured against the sensitive skin of Kalen's throat. "You've always been mine. Since the day you walked in with your cheap suitcase and your terrified eyes." "Julian," Kalen moaned, arching his back as Julian's hand slid under his t-shirt, skin scorching skin. "Say it," Julian commanded, nipping at his collarbone. "Tell me you don't want the artist. Tell me you want this." "I want this," Kalen confessed, the words sobbing out of him. "I want you." Julian pulled back, his eyes blown wide, triumphant and dark. "Good, because you're never getting rid of me. That scholarship requires you to maintain a high GPA? Fine. I'll tutor you. I'll buy the library if I have to. But you don't look at anyone else. You don't write blushy texts about anyone else. It was always you," Kalen whispered, reaching up to trace the sharp line of Julian's jaw. "The texts were always about you." Julian let out a shuddering breath, leaning his forehead against Kalen's. For a moment, the predator was gone, replaced by a man who had finally found his anchor. "I know," Julian said quietly. "That's why I didn't smash the phone." He kissed Kalen again, deeper this time, slower. "Promise." The night was long, and the boundaries of the room had shifted irrevocably. The hierarchy of St. Sterling University still stood outside their door, the wealth, the status, the expectations. But in here, in the dark, on a narrow twin bed, the only power dynamic that mattered was the one they were forging together. The dude's flirty note was trash in a bin. But Kalen? Kalen was finally exactly where he was meant to be. And that is how the silent scholar ensnared the king of St. Sterling. If you enjoyed seeing Julian lose his composure and take what he wanted, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Is it romantic or toxic for a lover to destroy a gift from someone else to keep you all to themselves? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.